Thank you for your patience. Let's see. Oops. This stupid thing. No matter how many times I set it up, it always messes up. Okay. There we go. Maybe. Okay, good. Sorry about that. Hello, hello. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Forever Conscious Research Channel. Hope you find yourselves well this evening, or whatever time of day it may be when you're listening. So, got a wild one for you tonight. This is, I'm sure I'm going to butcher the name, but it's, I'll just say Gulfide? 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 I'll just say Gulfide. Okay, and she was at the age of 8, just randomly goes blind. No incident, no catalyst for the reasoning as to why it happened, but it just happened. Later on, she also loses 3 family members in the span of 3 years. Or, yeah, I think it was 3 years, or, yeah, 3 family members between 84 and 87, if I recall. And one of which is her father, who dies in a drowning accident. Okay. Then she gets hit with an autoimmune disease and ends up having an NDE during surgery. And in between all this, there are also some premonitions, after-death communication, aberrations with the father. So it's jam-packed. There's a lot here. We have 1, 2, 3. We've probably got 4 data points. One is obviously the near-death experience. The second would be the premonition. And then the third would be after-death communication, aberration, and of course, the life script. Okay, so I mean, you know, technically the life script would fall under almost anything in general, but where we find those is typically in pre-birth experiences, life between lives, past life regression, those types of things. But it's a really, really heartbreaking testimony. And it's also, just want to point this out, I listened to it a couple times, and you really, this is one, like, especially like more later on, you really got to pay attention to it because there's just so much in it. And so this will be I believe my 3rd time listening to her case. And I'm sure there's going to be something else that pops up too. So just try and pay closer attention to this one than normal, because there's a lot. Okay, so let's jump right into this. Here we go.
Mrs. Egrigoz, you refer to yourself as an artist of the senses and consciousness, as a mediator between the worlds, meaning the physical, visible world, and the non-physical, invisible world. You suddenly went blind at the age of 8. Years later, you became ill from an autoimmune disease, and you also had a near-death experience during a major surgery several years ago. This experience had a particular feature because you were able to see events. Not only was it possible to subsequently prove that these events had actually happened, but they also changed your life in the future. Before we speak about these experiences, would you tell us a bit about your personal history? What brought about your loss of sight? What did you experience at the time?
Ein wenig aus Ihrer persönlichen Geschichte. Wie kam es zu der Erblindung? Was haben Sie dabei erlebt?
As you've mentioned before, I was 8 years old when it happened. It was 3 days before the summer holidays were about to start. I was
Okay, I'm sorry. I just got to say something. Just 3 days before summer holiday. Just saying.
in grade 2 in primary school, elementary school, and we were hanging out in the schoolyard during the long break at 10 a.m. I was looking at the Danube, and all of a sudden, I saw these grey dots. They were like those fruit flies, you know, these tiny dots. And they became bigger and bigger. And at one point, this happened within a few minutes, everything was gone, and I went blind. At the time, you wouldn't immediately call an ambulance and so forth and so on. So in the meantime, the school day ended, then it took a while until my parents came back home, and so on and so forth. And of course, they couldn't believe it. They thought it was some sort of a nonsense game made up by a kid. I can still remember every detail. Pink Panther was running on TV. And then my mum asked me to tell her what I saw on TV. And I just said black. And then we went to hospital the next day, and there the ophthalmologist confirmed that I couldn't see anything. Only then the whole ordeal started. We were sent to the eye clinic in Vienna, and there they confirmed it as well. At the time, laser technology had just come to Austria. The whole thing happened in 1983, and with the help of this laser technology, they soldered things together again. The retina had detached itself. That's what they found out then. These findings were sent around to all the specialists in Austria, because nobody could explain why this had happened. There was this groundlessness that had come out of nowhere.
So yeah, like as I mentioned, just comes out of nowhere. Okay, she's 3 days away from summer break from school, and this goes down. I mean, it's horrible. And well, let's continue.
It wasn't like an accident that had happened or anything along those lines.
But principally, the problem was a retinal detachment.
Yes, this had happened physically, and then they just soldered the retina together again. After spending a month in hospital, the doctor allowed us to go to Turkey by bus, for home leave, so to speak. And 3 days after we had arrived in Turkey, everything was dark again.
This means that you'd been able to see after the laser treatment.
Yes, 1 month plus a few days, but just in theory, because I had spent that time under a mask, so to speak, because my eyes were blindfolded. But you know, try to explain this to a kid. I always lifted up my eye patch a little bit on the side and followed my passion for painting. Well, that's what it was like ever since after the second blackout. I stayed blind, but as a child, I didn't find it that horrible. It was even thrilling to see the world in a different way.
So, you know, they end up having a brief resolution that restores her sight, and it doesn't last. Talk about a tease. And the moments that she has where her sight is restored are under a mask. Poor thing. Feels so bad for her.
See the world in a different way. I wasn't scared at all. The trauma came a lot later, when I was a teenager.
And nothing could be done anymore from a medical standpoint.
No, the eye doctor that had performed the surgery at the time, he did, I'll never forget. My mom told me years later when we talked about these topics that he got teary-eyed because he had hoped so much that the surgery would work. He said that he had expected it, but more like in my mid or late 20s. However, I thank heaven that it happened when I was a child, because when you're 25 or 30, you have a job, maybe a family, or whatever. You're in a completely different phase in life, and it is a lot harder to learn something and dip into this world than as a little girl.
And as a child, you were...
It's very, very difficult, but you know, she's right. I mean, just imagine going through this as you're, like she's saying, like in your 20s, you got, you got a job, you're married, you got this going on. Like as a child, if you have this happening, it's not like there's no good either way. There's no way to frame this as being positive. But I guess if it's gonna happen, no, there's really no good way to put this. There really isn't. There's no justification for it. It's horrible either way, but I guess I can see her point where if you get it as a child, if it happens to you as a child, like, you can learn easier and adjust your adult life as a result of it. I grew up with, I had a friend in elementary school who was almost completely blind. And, he was great. He got along good and did his thing. I mean, he needed help, but for the most part, he was very, very happy. But it, breaks your heart to see that and hear her story.
It's a lot harder to learn something and dip into this world than as a little girl.
And as a child, you were able to cope with this situation with hardly any difficulties, relatively speaking.
Totally. I still remember the day when we went to the school for the blind. And at the time, we didn't have the internet where you'd just check online and you'd find all this information. At the beginning, I was even sent to Turkey because my helpless parents, and when I say helpless, I mean this in a completely empathetic way. This is how I'd like to be understood. They didn't know, what shall we do with the kid now? They had to go to work. They sent me to my grandmother in Turkey. And then they found out sometime later that there was a school for the blind in Vienna. And then we started this proper pilgrimage in Vienna and went from one place to the next. So this whole journey was quite thrilling. And it seems like yesterday when I felt Braille writing under my fingertips for the first time. I was so fascinated because at the time I already knew how to write. I was so fascinated that these dots were supposed to be letters and that it was possible to read them. Well, and this is how everything began. I went to boarding school. This was the more negative aspect of it all. To be away from home from one moment to...
I'm sorry, I can't let it go this long without saying anything for reasons of YouTube, so just gotta say, hey everybody, how you doing? Yes, let's continue.
This was the more negative aspect of it all. To be away from home from one moment to the other. It would be a lie if I said it was easy. It was like that. But even then, I was able to cope with the situation rather quickly. And I spent several years with my, let's say, siblings at boarding school.
It only became a big problem for you during puberty.
Total, weil gerade in der Pubertät.
Yes, totally. Especially in puberty, this became a huge issue. Because it's the time when you start being interested in the other sex and the cool boys. Let's say, in the seeing world.
Extremst eitel.
And I was extremely vain at that age. I didn't want to present this to the outside world. If you...
That's, your heart goes out to her. I'm just imagine getting, I guess, 8 years or whatever, 8 years and however many months, including the procedure of having had the ability to see and then having it yanked away from you. And then you're going to high school, you want to date, and, you have the personality thing, the looks thing going on, and you want to impress somebody or try to relate with somebody and not have them think, oh, there's the blind girl. Like you want to be accepted for you. Just imagine how difficult that could be. Ugh.
I don't want to present this to the outside world, if you know what I mean.
Präsentiert wissen, ja.
And it was very difficult for me that I wouldn't get any of the cool boys and that I had to take, let's say, what was left. And this was very difficult for me. But as mentioned before, this was during puberty. Fortunately, I was able to overcome these things with everything that came with it. And then...
Der Tod hat in ihrem Leben schon sehr früh eine Rolle gespielt. Sie haben
Death already played a role early on in your life. As you had told me before this interview, within the years of 1984 and 1987, you lost 3 people that were very important to you. Amongst them was also your father, who drowned in the Danube. What was this time like for you? How did you deal with these losses? What conception of the world did you have?
gegangen.
So just imagine, before she answers the question, just imagine you're going through all this, and then you lose 3 people, including your father, to a drowning accident. As if, you know, she hasn't been handed a raw deal enough already. Let's just compound it and add to it. Oh, but there's more to come.
With these losses, what conception of the world did you have?
Gegangen. Welche Weltanschauung hatten Sie?
Ich muss dazu sagen,
Well, first I've got to say that I didn't become the person I am today, but that I've always been different.
Selig mit meinem Vater als kleines Kind.
When I was a small child, I already talked to my father, God bless his soul, about spirituality in my own way. Although I should mention that spirituality wasn't a thing in my family at all. Although we're officially members of Islam, we just did the standard things, as you would do in Christianity too. What I mean is, we'd celebrate all the holidays and so on. But I always had a different perception of things. At the time, we were living in a region of the surrounding district of Linz, called Lending. There, everything's pure nature. There are forests, fields, and streams. And the valley Zaubertal, where actually an exclusive residential area used to be. And we happened to live in that area too. And at the time, I already philosophized with my father about God and the world on a childlike level. And that's how I was able to internalize all these things. When my little nephew passed away in 1984, it was truly horrible, because he was still a baby. As you can see, I still get emotional, because it was still such a small life.
Ein Jahr später und 87 eben mein Vater.
And then, as mentioned before, my uncle passed away.
And then the uncle. Ah, this poor thing.
And just a year later, my father. And the day my father passed away, there was already an omen. Namely, insofar, we came together on Mother's Day, and after that, he brought me to the bus that would go to the boarding school. It was a collecting bus for pupils. And when we said our farewells, he told me, this is the last time we've seen each other. And I couldn't accept this remark. I said that he was speaking nonsense. And it was a Wednesday when my father died.
So, the father knew some sort of omen. You know how we talk about how there are hints, there are clues for our own time, okay? And you just got to pay attention to it. We know when something's coming, whether it be, like a illness that will result in death, or maybe even something like a car crash, okay, or something horrific, okay? But there's something like, pay attention to your thoughts, pay attention to your observations about you and others, because this will happen with those close to you. Those that are really close to you, you will get hints, but just pay super attention. I think when we know for our own death, it's very obvious. But for others, it may be something like this, like this is the last time I'm going to see you. This is the last time we're going to see each other. And, she's also boarding a bus to school, so you can see how that can be misconstrued. But in her heart, you can tell that she knows something's not right, but she doesn't want to accept it. So it's a tough spot. But just pay attention. Can't say that enough. It's good to be alert of cues that can come about through family members, friends, loved ones, and our own.
And at night, from the Wednesday to the Thursday, I had dreams I'll never forget. They were so horrible, about the end of the world. Those dreams were really horrible. I didn't see any images, but the experiences and emotions I had in this dream were horrible.
Okay, so let's just rewind that.
About the end of the world, Wednesday to the Thursday, I had dreams I'll never forget. They were so horrible, about the end of the world. Those dreams were really horrible. I didn't see any images, but the experiences and emotions I had in this dream were horrible.
So don't you find it interesting how she says, I didn't see any images in these dreams, but the feelings were horrible? I find that really impactful, considering she's blind. Because later on, she has an NDE where she's capable of seeing. But, I'd really like to, if I ever had a chance to speak with her, I would ask, for a standard regular dream dreams throughout your life, how often, if any, are you seeing visuals? Or is it just feelings and emotions of being within an experience? Because then I really think it goes to, just hear me out on this, it goes to, let's how do I put this? It goes to how, if there's a dream, there is still obviously that you're more connected in a dream to the body versus something like a near-death experience, an out-of-body experience. It's way different than a dream state. Okay, that's you're capable of going ridiculously far. It's different. Okay, so. I'd also like to talk to her about, have you had out-of-body experiences, with the exception of NDEs? And if so, how many and how often are you able to visualize and see versus feel compared to dreams? Or have you had both experiences where you can visually see things? I mean, we know with the NDE she did. But I would love to talk to her and kind of ask her deeper questions about overall dream experiences. I think that would be really an interesting point for us to know, to hear, along with anyone else who has been blind and able to answer that question. I think it would be a really, really interesting point to find out.
Images, but the experiences and emotions I had in this dream were horrible.
The feelings you had?
Yes. And the next day, when I woke up, I had a really bad eye inflammation and couldn't leave the boarding school to go for a walk. Here you can see how everything's cut out for you in life. And I was in the boarding school, and all of a sudden, the porter called me up. And I'd never been called up to this moment. And in my heart, I could truly feel how things were tearing apart. It was as if threads were tearing apart. I still haven't been able to grasp it up until today. But somehow I managed to overcome the huge distance between my schoolmates and the porter within milliseconds. I must have beamed myself over there. That's what it felt like. And I opened the door, and the first thing I said was, "Mommy?" And she answered. And then I said, "Daddy?" And he didn't answer. Wow. However, I didn't know they'd come. I couldn't have known because it was out of the ordinary.
Hear that? That's incredible. I know some of you don't like me rewinding, but I'm going to because it's an important part of this.
My schoolmates and the porter within milliseconds. I must have beamed myself over there. That's what it felt like. And I opened the door, and the first thing I said was, "Mommy?" And she answered. And then I said, "Daddy?" And he didn't answer. However, I didn't know they'd come. I couldn't have known because it was out of the ordinary. And when my dad didn't answer, I knew it in my own way. I just cried out, "Daddy's dead! Daddy's dead!"
So she knew. She knew. She knew, had a premonition. Or, experience that resulted, dreamlike premonition that revealed that Daddy's dead.
I knew it in my own way. I just cried out, "Daddy's dead! Daddy's dead!"
Without knowing what had happened?
Yes, yes. And of course, I'm a very emotional person who's very temperamental. And also my zodiac sign is Aries. And so I crushed more or less literally against brick walls.
Und hab einfach, total durchdreht, klar, ja.
Well, I couldn't cope with the pain at that moment, and I just went crazy. And then, relatively soon, I got the image that my dad was on an island and that I couldn't go there.
Okay, so she also says, I got the impression that my dad was on an island. There seems to be basically, we can call it something like a holding tank. The in-between where a person who passes reach something like, we can say like an island, okay? And not capable of going there and visiting. To me, it feels like almost like a holding pen, where it's like, okay, once, you'll be processed when you're processed. So maybe you go through the tunnel, the tunnel to the light, to the life review, you go through all that, and then they kind of keep you in a certain area until they're ready to process you to the next level, whether that's you're able to take a break and relax a little while and recharge, or if you go directly to something like the soul school that we see in past life regressions, life between lives, and occasionally in the pre-birth memories, but that's more like the final phase before you come back here. So I find it interesting that she is this perceptive, yet unable to connect with this island that he's at. And if you remember when we spoke to Harold about his pre-birth memory before he came down here, he mentioned a floating island with Greek type architecture, Greco-Roman architecture, and water. Okay, now we don't get that type of detail from her, but it's just something to put out there. I'm not saying there's even a connection between the two, but there might be.
relatively soon, I got the image that my dad was on an island and that I couldn't go there.
The other thing I want to say is with things like the soul schools, okay, where basically it's like like a classroom in the astral. I'll just call it like an indoctrination center that we go to in between lives, where there's like a teacher, an ascended master, and blah blah blah. Okay, and then once we're kind of go through that, then we're spit out to the next phase, which is picking out the life script and where you're born, possible jobs, location, parents, etc. Heartaches, traumas.
Go there.
Das ging relativ bald, ja.
This happened quite soon, but coping with this bereavement, this pain, this sudden loss, a person that would have given me support in this stage of life, this took 30 years to overcome. I mean, I was 30 years old. As mentioned before, I was 12 years old when my father passed away. This is a very significant age. Well, at the age between 18 and 20, I'd already gained my own experiences. And that helped me to cope and find closure in a different way.
You had a very close relationship with your father. After his death, did you have the feeling to be close or in contact with him?
Definitely. This was very exciting.
Definitely.
Of course, I was often seen as being weird, but I've always talked about it, also in boarding school. There were many moments where I'm sure that he watched over me. He was there. But at the beginning, when I knew he was there, I was scared and ran away. I knew it, but at the same time, it was a creepy situation. When you're a child and suddenly you feel this energy in a room, you know it, but at the same time, you don't know it.
They were so real that you could feel them?
Well, the first time he literally appeared, he passed through the room. I was eating at the table and was working on my homework. I was doing maths. I remember every detail.
Okay, so that's the aberration. Okay. After death communication, so that kind of falls under this one. And she's like, she knows, she feels his energy, she knows, and then she flat out sees him fly across the room.
He literally appeared. He passed through the room. I was eating at the table and was working on my homework. I was doing maths. I remember every detail. Maths used to be the subject we always worked on together. Actually, that's something I'm only realizing now, after so many years. Well, that there is a connection. And I was sitting at the table opposite, and suddenly I could feel somebody behind me traversing from the right to the left of the room. And it was clear to me that it must have been my father.
Did this happen rather shortly after he had drowned?
This happened, yes, this must have been at around that time. If it was a year or 2 or 5 weeks after he had died, I can't tell.
Okay, so just with after-death communication, there is a uptick after someone dies. Could last weeks, months, could go years. Sometimes on the anniversary date of the person's death, or like leading right up to the anniversary date of the deceased death, the person's death. Then you could start having experiences where it could be just after death communication, where you're just receiving it telepathically, but you know it's them, you feel an energy, a presence, or they could just appear And sometimes they can appear where it's blatant and you know who they are hands down, and other times it could appear in something like the form of an orb or wild synchronicity, along with like some sort of paranormal aberration experience. So,
or 2 or 5 weeks after he had died, I can't tell. I just knew that it happened still quite at the beginning. And I remember that I ran out of the room screaming, because at the same time I was so scared, because I wasn't used to it. And later on, it became a usual thing that more and more people who were not physically present tried to get in contact with me.
And those contacts with your dad decreased after a while?
Ja, weil
Yes, because I also realized that I didn't want that.
ich will sozusagen nicht.
I didn't want him to be in alert in his world all the time. Let's phrase it like that. I'm trying to humanize it a bit, because I can't describe it in any other way.
Ich es anders nicht verbalisieren könnte. Ja? Und ich wollte aber auch
I didn't want to have this feeling that I need my dad at all times, who, let's say, would constantly look after me. But there were enough clues that he, let's say, got involved into things.
sich mitgemischt, also wirklich mitgemischt hat, ja.
When and how did you feel the first signs of your autoimmune disease?
Wie alles in meinem Leben irgendwie.
As everything in my life, this episode in my life also came out of nowhere.
Plötzlich.
It happened on a Thursday in October 2000. I was still in work at the time. Well, I was working at Telecom, a communications company at the time, and I had just started working in Linz. Before that, I had worked in Vienna, and in 1999, I moved back to Linz in Upper Austria. And I was sitting in the office sometime in the afternoon, when it was already relatively quiet. And all of a sudden, as always, the phone was ringing. I picked up the phone and could hear myself slur, as if I was drunk.
Wie wenn ich alkoholisiert wäre, wie wenn ich lallen würde. Denke ich mir, was ist denn jetzt los?
And I was thinking to myself, what's going on now? My first thought was that I was having a stroke, and that I hadn't noticed it. My tongue was really affected by it. And when I called my mum, so I would know whether this condition would stay or to just see what was going on. And it stopped. I had no idea what had happened. And this condition started to repeat itself once a week. So once a week, I had this slur, and slowly this started to increase. And at one point, I was certain that something was wrong with my body. However,
so it's kind of strange that it's once a week, right? But she'll kind of shed some light on something that unfortunately I can't go into any more detail about because of where we are, but she briefly touches on it, and I'll pause it in that moment and make of it what you will.
Wrong with my body. However, since it was still quite rare at this point of time, the doctors thought it was psychosomatic. We don't need to talk about it, but for me, every cause of an illness can be found in the psyche. But at that...
Okay, so what she just said right there, you know, make of it what you will. I think there's some truth to it, if not a lot. I've seen it with other people. Personally, for myself, I haven't been able to overcome my health issues with the way she describes. I'm not saying it's not possible, because I do. I think because we are creator beings, that we can have some sort of direction and in the outcome of illnesses that we may have. Okay, but Again, I am not a doctor. This is not medical advice. I'm not a licensed professional, none of that stuff. And you should always consult your physician no matter what. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that. But, you know, my personal opinion is that I do think there is something to it. I'll leave it at that. Yeah, placebo effect. Exactly. It's amazing. Yeah. Good point, 15-foot G. It's good to see you, my friend. We missed you the other night.
Illness can be found in the psyche. But at that point, it had already been physical. But the whole ordeal, until I was given a diagnosis, took 2 years. And in the last year, it was so bad that my muscles stopped working completely, and I needed nursing care.
So the muscle functions in your body decreased.
Well,
the diagnosis was myasthenia gravis, and the only muscle that was not affected by this was the heart muscle. Apart from that, every muscle in the body was affected. And then signs of weakness happened, because the transfer between the synapses didn't work anymore. And then the muscles didn't do what they were supposed to do anymore. And also in this last year, I couldn't eat or drink anymore, and I lost 30 kilograms. Thank God I had built up some reserves before. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to overcome this. And then I was finally able to convince the doctors that they would examine me in hospital, because I couldn't take it any longer. Because I knew if they didn't do anything soon, I would die. Because I couldn't take it any longer, physically speaking.
This means you were in pain as well.
No. But my strength. I mean, if you can barely eat and drink, and you only get something into your body zip by zip, or just a few drops without suffocating, life wasn't fun anymore. And here it was the same. It took a long time until a diagnosis was made. Thank God the chief physician, intuitively, at least I think it was more intuitively, that he guessed the diagnosis, because all his assistant doctors had the opinion that he was wrong. So I let them explain the disease. And while they were telling me, I said, "This is going to be the diagnosis." I knew it. I could feel it right away. That's it. And then they did the examinations accordingly. On Monday, when the doctor came for the doctor's round, he held my hand and looked at me. Because of this hand pressure, I could tell that he'd come with the diagnosis. And I looked at him. I can still remember every detail. I laughed and cried at the same time. The doctors who were present were a bit irritated by my reaction. I just said, "I'm so glad that he found a name for it."
Now you finally knew what the problem was.
Yes, because now it was easier to cope with it. And of course we looked at the options, but there weren't many. Because as mentioned before, not many people are affected by this disease, relatively speaking. And therefore not much research has been done. That's a fact.
How common is the disease?
At the time, there were about 350 cases in Austria. Of course, this number has increased because autoimmune diseases have increased a lot in the past few years. So there were a few medicines to choose from, and there was also the option to remove the thymus gland. Because due to this diagnosis, they knew that the thymus gland was enlarged. And as you know, the thymus gland is responsible for growth and turns itself off when puberty starts. The activity is reduced because of the growth hormones. And when they were working on the diagnosis, they found out that it showed tumor-like activities and that it would be good to remove it. And then I knew that I didn't have have time anymore to find alternatives for myself because my body wouldn't have lasted much longer. So I decided to agree to this surgery.
That was in 2002 when it subsequently came to a near-death experience.
Yes, and I should also mention that when you suffer from myasthenia gravis, the doctors are extremely scared to narcotize the patient because due to the weakness of the muscles, complications can happen. That's why they were even more baffled how fit I was after the surgery. However, this fitness didn't last long.
It didn't last long. Ugh, poor thing.
The next day, I remember it clearly. I was in the hospital ward and they served pizza margarita for lunch.
Sounds good to me.
My husband at the time came to visit me, and I asked him to cut off a micro piece of the pizza for me because I wanted to have a little nibble. And when I put that piece into my mouth and tried to swallow it, I realized I was about to suffocate, and I could only communicate by hand signals that he had to act real quick because I couldn't breathe anymore. And then all the staff ran together, and I was moved to the intensive care ward. I mean the surgical intensive care ward. And I knew that I had to be moved to the neurological ward. So I was moved there, and there they did this medical intervention the next day. They performed a plasmapheresis, meaning they filtered my blood, which is done to reduce the antibodies. And this medical intervention was horrible.
Absolut schlimm.
This medical intervention was horrible. Just imagine, just wait till you hear what has to happen to her to get this procedure.
To reduce the antibodies. And this medical intervention was horrible.
Absolut schlimm.
Do you mean concerning the pain?
Ich erzähle es jetzt einfach so, wie
Yes, because I'll just tell you the way it is done. Because they open up your carotid artery while you're fully conscious, without any local anesthetics. And that's just, humans have the survival mechanism that tells you, help, no.
Und wenn du aber schon geschwächt bist, wie es ich halt war,
and as in my case, I was weakened, and the stress was just unbearable. And I can clearly remember the thought I had. I knew it's over now. I'm done. And my last thought was, Daddy, you died the same way. The suffocation.
Ja, und mein letzter Gedanke war, Papa, du bist auch so gestorben. Dieses Ersticken. Und dann bin ich nochmal ganz kurz zu mir gekommen.
And then I briefly regained consciousness again and realized that the doctors were very busy. And I was thinking to myself, I don't want to live anymore anyway. Because of that pain, the pain was so... I rather wanted to pass away than endure this pain.
So she's got a thought of her father. Daddy, this is the way you died. Suffocation. She's just trying to eat. She's just trying to eat.
I rather wanted to pass away than endure this pain. Well, and then the journey began. Because suddenly I realized, as mentioned before, of course, I didn't have any sense of time at that moment.
Natürlich, ja, das gibt's nicht mehr. Zeit gibt's einfach nicht mehr in dem Moment.
I actually saw that I was walking around on a path in a totally lonely and grey concrete city that was abandoned.
Beton, ja? Ausgestorben.
So she gets an NDE that is just gloomy. It's abandoned city, abandoned area. She deserves better. And again, you have to think back about how she her first thought was like, oh, Dad, this is how you went. I'm going to go the same way. Think about that's like very weirdly scripted. She's already been to hell and back multiple times. And now, oh, well, we're going to give you a surgery that's miserable. Or you're going to not be able to eat your margarita pizza. I don't know what they set her up with before she came down here, and that unfortunately she agreed to, but it's not good. It's not good. It makes you wonder about, who I often think about are people that grow up in, really, really worse situations, worse governments, like something like China, North Korea, Iran, and make of it what you will, no matter what you believe about whatever these governments are doing. The point is most of us, not everyone, but, I know we have people listening from all over the world. The bulk of us are in better living conditions than most. And I often think to myself, well, how did they get hoodwinked into living where they live? But, there's no blame there. There's no blame, because when we get to that point where we have to pick out a life script and a location and a soul group to come down with or meet that's already established here, but is linked to us, it's very, very difficult to, I think it's very difficult, if not impossible, to revert back and say no. You might be able to say no here and there, and they may give you like a little delay, or, send you on your way and think that you're in control. Meanwhile, they've already achieved the memory wipe at the light. That's really key to all this, is because you shouldn't even, we're all here. Okay. Let's not forget that. Okay. We're all here. We shouldn't even get to the point of going to the tunnel, going to life review. None of that, because that's where it all occurs. I am absolutely convinced of it, that if we did not choose to go and enter into the light. Now, mind you, I think if you're in the tunnel, I know. If you're in the tunnel, you can abort. You do have control. But once you get to the light, that love, that powerful feeling, that euphoria rush, we're drugged, okay? That's the bottom line of what's going on at the light. When we get to that point, I seriously think it's near impossible to revert and bail. Now, maybe it's not. So that's why, like, when you see all these pre-birth memories, okay, with the life script, and then you follow them down here, they have certain memories, like we've seen with Harold, like we've seen with Christian, and a few others. The guy who was in the snow, I can't remember his name, but the point is I think once you're at that point, you've gone through the soul school, you've gone, you're looking up to the teacher, the master, the blah blah blah, the council of elders, all that stuff. It's too late. It's too late. You're going to end up back in this place, okay? And we just got to learn to say no. We are not going to deal or interact with any of this. Like, remember, have your resolve firm. It's unrelenting. You are the king of the castle, the queen of the castle, whatever, okay? You decide what your destiny is. And if your destiny is to make sure that you're not reincarnating here and that your desire is to exit this matrix completely, that's what will happen. But don't have doubt. Don't think that this outside force who we are supposedly accountable to has control over you, because it doesn't. It doesn't. It's a game you cannot win. This game, parasitic game, is not designed in a way for us to win it. It's just not possible. And we can do so much better. I know we can do so much better. And there's way more out there than just this. So even for the people who are doubting the soul trap thing, no big deal. All I say to you is, what's wrong with standing up for yourself? What's wrong with not having to make an instant decision on your deathbed or be visited and interrupted with who we feel or who you feel are your family members, your deceased family members? They get us with those attachments. They get us with those hooks. Meanwhile, those are emotions. Those are matrix emotions and feelings that are all part of the deal. And then they replicate it on steroids times a zillion in the light. And then there's a perceived God or a Jesus or a Buddha or Muhammad, on and on, along with our loved ones trying to whisk us on through the tunnel to the pearly gates of the white light, and boom, that's all that's needed. Because once you're there, that's it. I seriously feel that's where we have to stand up for ourselves. Or before that, I'm sorry, we got to stand up for ourselves now, not then. Holy shit. Sorry, I didn't mean that. Don't want to send the wrong message. So please, please, please live your life knowing that you are the decider of your fate. Nothing has a right to judge you. If you allow that one little instance of doubt, of that you need to answer or atone for your sins, or you deserve judgment from some source that created this mess, you don't. And the worst, what's the worst that could come of it? Oh, I stood up for myself, and I stood up for myself, and I'm going to go my own way and do my own thing. Oh. Well, if this is so godly and so Jesus-like and yada, 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 on and on, if my deceased loved ones love me so much, then they're not going to demand that I make a decision immediately. Because remember, they will come at your deathbed leading up to. Remember, deathbed visions, visitations. This is another data point. They will try and manipulate you while you're still here. Try and win you over while you're still in the physical. So then, when it's your time to really go, hey, so-and-so, come with me. Come on. This is Grandpappy Winston. Come on. See that tunnel right there? That's the tunnel to God. And I am Grandpappy Winston, ready and waiting to take you with us. Who's to say that's Grandpappy Winston? Who knows? Nobody knows. I'm telling you, in my opinion, that's not Grandpappy Winston. It's not. Okay, so we'll move on. Thank you so much, AA, for your very generous and kind super chat. AA says, another great show. Appreciate all your research. Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. Much appreciated.
I actually saw that I was walking around on a path in a totally lonely and grey concrete city that was abandoned.
Beton, ja? Ausgestorbenen Stadt unterwegs bin. Auf einem Weg.
I was walking and felt this deep sadness in me. And at the same time, I knew that this was my life.
Dass das mein Leben ist, ja? Dieser Weg.
Well, while walking along this path, I looked behind me and everything was grey. And this made me really sad, this image. There were no colors. I was talking to myself, this can't have been my life.
Und dann gibt's ein
And then, let's say there was this change of sequences. Then I experienced how they were dealing with those devices. I sensed all these devices, and I also saw that I was wired, and so on and so forth. And then the hospital staff brought me to my mom, to her apartment. Of course, this didn't happen in the physical reality.
In der physischen Realität war es nicht so, ja?
Zunächst noch eine
Before we continue, I would like to ask you more about.
All right, so we are over the 1 hour mark, actually 1 hour and 10 minutes. So we're going to just take a quick 5-minute break. I will be right back. Thank you so much for your patience. See you shortly. Welcome back. So let's get back into, I just want to say, you know, I'm not saying there's a connection here, but I just have to say it. Those of you familiar with Egrigoz, I find her last name interesting, but I'm not going to say anything on top of that. I just find it interesting. Egrigoz, Egrigoz, I don't know. Just saying something to. That's it. I'll leave it at that because, you know, again, with every NDE that I talk about, I try to always convey and make sure that anyone listening, especially the person who's had the experience, that my heart goes out to them. It's very, very difficult to kind of get to the point where you see the soul trap. And, I know there are plenty of people out there who go through these horrific life scripts, and including near-death experiencers, and it's not easy. It's not easy. So I'll leave it at that, and just know that my heart goes out to Gulfide or Gulfide. I'm sorry for butchering your name if you ever happen to run across this. So let's get back into it.
War's nicht so, ja?
Zunächst noch ein
And then the hospital staff brought me to my mom, to her apartment. Of course, this didn't happen in the physical reality.
In der physischen Realität war's nicht so, ja?
Zunächst noch ein
Before we continue, I would like to ask you more about this internal image that you described earlier. You saw grey concrete and you missed seeing colours. Why did you feel this need to see colours? Because as somebody who is blind,
Hold on. Carice says it makes you think she lied too and didn't agree to any of it. How could anyone agree to that? Okay, look, I'm going to just stop it for a minute because I think that's a great point. Okay, I'm sorry. So let's just put this on pause. So Carice says, again, it makes you think she lied too and didn't agree to any of it. How could anyone agree to that? Okay, so this is how it works. Like, we have our previous life, okay? Now, no matter how good or how bad we may have been, again, there's no pleasing this system. That's like the most important thing that I think we all need to come to grips with is that there's no pleasing it. So you can be the saint of all saints, walking around, praying, which that's a whole nother word we can go on about in and of itself, but you can do good, use your intention for good, or finances, or anything you could think of, and walk the walk, talk talk throughout your entire life, and you will still end up at the end of the road where you're judged and something went wrong. I mean, I have seen NDEs where little children are judged. Okay, we're talking 7, 8 years old, 6 years old. And they're judged. Like, again, remember, you're coming into this body and we grow over time. We're born, I think we're, even though I say we're born ignorant, we're born a little more awake and aware than we are throughout most of our lives, until we start questioning things and reaching outside the box, so to say. Okay, so as you move along, again, going through the tunnel, I'm not going to go too crazy with this because we already talked about it earlier in the stream. You go through the tunnel, you go to the light, you get your memory zapped, then you go through the whole cycle again, where you go to the soul classes, you take a break, then you go to the soul classes, you get rejuvenated, and then at some point you are convinced that you have to go back for whatever the reason may be. It may be for guilt and shame as it relates to your past life, or maybe you have a mission, like you've got to go help a bunch of people on Earth, and you're one of the only people that can do it. And so whatever way they convince us to come down here, it doesn't matter, because we're all here. Okay. Then you reach the point where the pre-birth experience, where the life script, where you pick out the body, you pick out the scenarios that you will likely run through. Now, this is where it gets a little ugly. You pick out your parents, you pick out the location you're born in, your careers, or your boyfriend, your girlfriend, etc. Okay, so then you're zapped down here, and then you play out that life script. Okay, now yes, we do have free will, but the free will is where we take control of our own destiny, and it gets ugly when we're asleep. Okay, when we're just automatrons, okay, and we're just just living our day-to-day life, consuming what is given to us through either school or TV or radio or media, newspapers, magazines, etc. Even music, okay, and that's consume, and it's molding and shaping our subconscious and conscious mind, and making us act in a certain way that isn't necessarily in our best interest. So I lost it. So people are going to play out their scripts, however that may be. And some of that will include things like a near-death experience. And, oh, wow. Okay. All right. So I'm sorry. I'm kind of losing my train of thought with all the spam going on. I don't endorse any of that. That's in the chat. So yes. So it could be, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're dealing with something like an NPC when they're giving us certain kind of canned answers that we see time and time again, or something a little different like we see in today's case. They're not doing it purposely. They're doing it because, yes, this was likely planned in the life script, and then it plays itself out. Now, the only way I think, this is my opinion, the only way I think is that once we become a lot more lucid and aware of what is going on here, only then we can take better control of our destiny, of ourselves, and allow it to do what it's got to do. So take that for what it is. I'm going to move on. I'm kind of lost my train of thought. I apologize.
I'd like to ask you more about this internal image that you described earlier. You saw grey concrete and you missed seeing colours. Why did you feel this need to see colours? Because as somebody who is blind, wouldn't you be used to not seeing any colours?
Well, colors are still as important as they used to be in the past. What I mean is, I'm living in a very colorful world in my life. So colors are still as important as during the time I was still able to see colors. And to me, colors are life.
And this was what you missed?
And that's why it was clear to me that this, so to speak, this grim life was shown to me. Do you know what I mean?
I understand.
I knew immediately that this was my life journey, up until now, and that it had been just grey and not exciting.
And then there was a change of scenes?
Yes, and as mentioned before, there was a change of scenes as a whole for me. Of course, I don't know how much time had passed in the meantime. I can't retrace it in the least bit, but the events were like that. I could see myself being brought to my mother, into her apartment, and I was attached to all those devices. I was able to sense, experience, see, and feel all those things.
So you mean what the devices looked like on you?
Yes. That's right. And the story was, it was the combination that seemed crazy to me. I was experiencing all these things and the hospital staff was bringing me to my mom. Of course, this wasn't the case in reality. And I saw my mom sitting on the couch, where she actually always used to sit. Although I should mention that I'd never seen this scene in my real life, because we hadn't lived in that apartment yet, in the apartment that I saw there. What I mean is, I hadn't remembered this image from the time when I was still able to see.
So, in this image, you experienced being close to your mother, although in reality, you were actually in hospital at the time.
I
was in hospital, and my mom was in the apartment. And now we get to the thrilling part. And I saw my mom sitting there, and she was knitting something in red. And I saw that it was red. I knew my mom didn't hear me. I was aware of that. I was completely aware of that. And her whimpers sounded so horrible to me. It really tore apart my heart. Because at that moment, I knew that there was nothing worse that could happen for her now. You know, when I wouldn't come back anymore, and I promised her I'd come back. And this was exactly the moment I started going back into my body.
Zurückgebracht wurde, ja, also in dieser Welt, in diesem Erleben.
And when I was officially brought back to hospital, so to speak, back into this world of experiences, and there was this auxiliary nurse who was called Reini, and he told me, listen, and the radio was on, and there was this classic O-dry radio signal, this familiar sound, you know what I mean? This popular Austrian radio station. And suddenly the speaker said, it's funny because it's so out there, you couldn't make it up. And the speaker said to me, Auxiliary Nurse Reini wants to say that there is a girl in hospital. And my name, Gulfide, was mentioned. And if she promises that she wants to live, they will see each other again. And then he actually put a ring on my left ring finger. And this ring was really...
Also ein Ring auch genauso oval. Nur...
And that's something that really shocks me now, because this ring was as oval as the ring I'm wearing now. I'd never seen anything like that as a girl who was still able to see.
Big moment right there. Big moment, or big moments, you know. Sees the mom knitting in red, you know, seeing the ring on top of it.
The ring was as oval as the ring I'm wearing now. I'd never seen anything like that as a girl who was still able to see. There was this glimmer in this stone. It was like as if you set fire to something inside a crystal, and it would be alive. I woke up from this coma, and the first thing I did was look for this ring. And then, as mentioned before, the journey back into my body happened.
In dieser Zeit bis zu ihrer
Up to the point of your decision, did you experience anything else, or was the experience near your mother the main event?
Zentrale.
There were other events too. During one of them, my husband at the time came to visit me, and at the time I had a guide dog, and my husband smuggled the dog into the hospital.
That's a good husband.
In retrospect, these are all just elements that showed me that I had responsibilities. You know, they functioned as triggers to tell me that I had responsibilities and duties.
Okay, triggered me to show that I had responsibilities and duties. This is very in line with the mission statements that we hear time and time again with NDEers, right? She's perceiving some mission. She's got some things to finish and go through. So it's a very, very, you know, kind of under the radar way of saying it, but she's saying it. So that one stood out big time for me. So there's probably, in my opinion, I'm not going to say this for certain, but in my opinion, there is a memory wipe here. There's probably something missing. There's a gap. Because most of the time we hear about missions, we hear about purpose and all those things. Like, you know, you got to go down, you got to do better for Earth, and you got to save people and this and that. You got a lot to do. And you know, meanwhile, yeah, they come back and they may improve upon their life and others. But as far as the whole enchilada is concerned, we've seen so many cases of this that it borders on the absurd that things can change as a result of someone having a near-death experience. It may change within their world and maybe their surrounding world of who they can help and impact locally, or maybe even worldwide by sharing their testimony and you know, maybe funding a homeless shelter or whatever the case may be. And there could be a lot of good that comes out of it. But as far as like, oh, saving the world or worldwide change or making a difference, no. Because remember, the same old song and dance has been played here for as far back as we have records for. This is not new. This is the same thing happening time and time again. And it can't be stated enough. So even though, yeah, I repeat myself on certain data points, the reason I'm repeating it is because that's where the patterns show up. So just understand that we are where we are. No, you know, clearly throughout the course of history, no matter what you believe about history, these things have been reported, and these missions and this purpose and all this stuff has been thrown out there. And yet here we are. Here we are in an authoritarian nightmare worldwide. It's only gotten worse. It hasn't gotten better. So let's just be honest with each other and call it what it is. That, you know, hey, maybe, just maybe, we're all being taken for a ride. And we need to just learn about self-discovery within ourselves and take the sovereign and liberated path at the time of natural death.
And at the time, I had a guide dog, and my husband smuggled the dog into the hospital. In retrospect, these are all just elements that showed me that I had responsibilities. You know, they function as triggers to tell me that I had responsibilities and duties, that I can't just kick the bucket. Even though there was nothing more peaceful in my world of emotions than being in this state.
So
there was nothing more peaceful than this state. Sounds like the love bomb, doesn't it? Peaceful, love, you know, I don't want to say loving because we really didn't hear that from her. But you can see the little hints, the little itty bitty hints that cross over with all the other NDEs. Mission, purpose, you're not done yet. You're not, you know, basically you're not allowed to come here yet because you have things to do. Meanwhile, she's been handed a bill of goods her entire life. Yeah, so let's just extend it a little bit more. It's just sad. Sad.
But I can't just kick the bucket. Even though there was nothing more peaceful in my world of emotions than being in this state.
So this often described feeling of safety, of warmth, was also very present during your experience.
Yes, it was an inner peace. It was like as if I was free from everything, but not from my responsibilities and duties. Well, it was as if this bad conscience was still there. I can't really explain it. I think that's why these images popped up. At the time, the most important beings for me were my mom and my dog. And that's why I think these images were shown to me.
Boom, 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 boom. That's all I got to say. Drop the mic. There's another data point. Well, what do? What do they do in all the other NDEs? They lure us in, or they lure the people in who have the experiences with whoever they are connected with at the time, or even the ones who have already passed and will work as a proxy to get the person back to the body. Wow. Just wow. It becomes so obvious once you see it, like how clear this deception is, how ABC it is. Now, yeah, what we have here is a little different, but it's got all of the same traits as the other NDEs. You know, she admits it herself. Like, the most important people in my life was what? My dog and my mom. Well, what's rolled out? How is that connection made? Again, I think we're dealing with a memory wipe at some point in between this, because there's definitely something missing. But we're getting enough of a glimpse that we can kind of stand on this and say, okay, compare it to all the other NDEs that we've gone over on the channel. And well, it you know, it is what it is. It's a connection, a clear connection.
The most important beings for me were my mom.
The most important beings for me.
And my dog. And that's why I think these images were shown to me.
And that's why I think or thought those images were shown to me. Shown. That means given to her. Received outside. Something transmitting it to her.
The most important beings for me were my mom and my dog. And that's why I think these images were shown to me. So something would be enticed in me, so I would fight, so to speak. So I wouldn't kick the bucket and just go. There's something else I'd like to talk to you about. Because you just asked whether I had experienced other events. It happened during the process of waking up, when I realized that I couldn't move, because I was tied onto the bed at that time. These were safety precautions that if you woke up from a coma, you wouldn't do anything you shouldn't do.
Neben meinem Bett.
And next to my bed, a man was...
So she's tied down, which, make sure she doesn't hurt herself.
Mein Bett.
And next to my bed, a man was sitting who was wearing white clothes. This must have been this in-between state, where I still had access to the sense of seeing, but at the same time, I already perceived myself as lying physically in bed. And since I was tied to the bed, I could only reach his knee with my fingertips. And his clothes were made of linen or cotton. Like the trousers and jackets that are worn by doctors. And I was sure that he was a doctor and he was chewing a gum. And by doing this, he really got on my nerves at that very moment. Talk to me. I don't know what's going on, and this stresses me out. And I realized that I was screaming, but no sound came out of me, at least none that was audible.
Das habe ich dann sehr wohl registriert, ja. Und das Schlimme für mich war einfach in diesem...
That was something I was well aware of. And for me, the horrible thing was that during this transition, when I went from this peaceful world back into this body, into this intensity, I came back, and first of all, and ultimately, I didn't see anything anymore. I heard those devices ticking around me, and I didn't know at all what was going on. And I would have needed somebody who really existed.
I didn't know exactly what was going on. Needed some assistance.
Know at all what was going on. And I would have needed somebody who really existed.
Or really existed, I apologize. I missed that.
Know at all what was going on. And I would have needed somebody who really existed. And heaven sent me this being.
Heaven sent me this being. Heaven sent. Again, received. Outside forces moving in.
And I'm certain that it was my dad. The first...
And it's dad. I know I'm pausing it a lot, but again, this can't be stated enough. It's dad. Outside being sent in, and it's dad. Bring out the dad, roll him out. Roll out the welcome wagon.
And heaven sent me this being, and I'm certain that it was my dad. The first moment I realized the connections, I said, this was my dad. Namely, he was sitting for such a long time next to me until I actually took my first breath. So he was sitting next to me until the intubation was taken out. And I gradually realized that he was only visible to me, because my sister-in-law came to visit. She showed a reaction that was totally right. When she came to visit me, I was still intubated. And at the time, because of her, my hands were untied, and I wrote down letters, capital letters, like A and so on. And Sylvia, my sister-in-law, transferred these letters onto a sheet of paper. And so we communicated with the help of keywords. And I repeatedly said, ring and left hand. And she asked me questions, and I answered with yes or no. So I nodded or shook my head to say yes or no. And that's how we communicated at the time. So I conveyed the message to her that there was somebody, and she didn't tell me there is nobody, but she always confirmed it, so to speak. She accepted that this was the way it was at that moment. And as mentioned before, when I took my first breath, he disappeared. which was very confusing because I was looking for him. I wanted to thank him. And when my sister-in-law came back later, she said, "We'll look for him later. Everything's okay. Everything is fine."
This means, from a purely physical point of view, you were in hospital, you woke up after the anesthesia and were cared for by your sister-in-law at your bed, and you had memories where detailed images of the situation in hospital were mixed with internal images. And these images had a very special meaning for you, for your feelings.
Yes.
This formative image of your mother, did you ever speak to her about it later on and how you experienced the situation?
Yes, I did. About half a year later, I mean, at first you need time to process all these experiences. And then I asked her how she experienced me when she came to visit me in hospital. And when she saw her child lying there, being attached to all those devices, and what it was like for her. And then I told her, you know, what the moment was like when I came back. And then I told her. And she got up, walked to the room next door, and came back with a jumper, a red jumper that she had made for my niece, who'd been a few years old at the time. And she handed me the jumper and said, "There it is. If every one of these knit mashes could talk, they would tell you a story."
So this was exactly what your mother had done at the time.
Yes, and for me this was also the confirmation that the body and consciousness are two different dimensions.
That's a great moment right there, Shais. That's when I realized.
For me, this was also the confirmation that the body and consciousness are two different dimensions.
The body and consciousness are two different dimensions. Now, you know, like I really don't go crazy with trying to please the skeptics, because the skeptics are, you know, at least in terms of if NDEs are real or not, like they're just never going to be able to go as far as acknowledging the soul trap. But here you have it. I mean, one of the biggest key data points with those who deny NDEs that researchers will bring up, who have dedicated their lives to this stuff, are cases like hers. She's a textbook example of someone who proves that we are more than our physical body. And it's awesome to have an example like that available. Now, soul trap aside, the point is we are more than this physical body, way more.
For me, this was also the confirmation that the body and consciousness are two different dimensions.
And that these, let's call them images, which you saw, had an actual value of reality.
The images of the red jumper and so on were not internal. I saw them. At that moment, I also realized that I was seeing these things. So I was aware of that, as much as I was aware that my mom couldn't hear me when I said, "I'll promise you, I'll come back."
Why did you find a physical correlation with the experience of that ring?
Also in der physischen Welt.
Not in the physical world, in the sense that this ring really existed. But for me, it was a message from my angel of life.
Okay. All right. So we've had other examples of rings. Now, granted, different in her case, but sometimes, actually, not just NDEs, but even breakthrough trip experience, trip reports, where you'll see someone talk about seeing a ring. Now, I know I'm going a little out there on this one, but just hear me out, where they'll see different situations. Sometimes it'll be equivalent to a life review. Sometimes it'll be equivalent to seeing like different realities that have nothing to do with them, but it's spinning. And then I'll go a step further and say that maybe, just maybe, it has something to do with the wheel of samsara, the wheel of birth and death. or death and rebirth, I should say. Now, I can't say with any certainty, but the wheel, the ring, things like that do play a role. And maybe I'm really reaching on this one, but I'm just saying it, throwing it out there, not saying don't take it for anything, just putting it out there. Just an observation.
Existed. But for me, it was a message from my angel of life, as I call him, who wanted to, let's say, entice me to find my life, my love for life again, with the help of this radio message.
Eigentlich zum Leben, die Liebe zum Leben aus mir heraus locken wollte. Verstehen Sie, was ich meine?
Do you know what I mean? That this was supposed to be the declaration of love to life, and I had to promise him to agree. If I was living my life, we'd meet again.
In how far has this experience changed you permanently?
Es hat mich bestätigt in meinem.
It confirmed my assumption and my imagination, and of my conviction that there isn't an ending after so-called death.
Nach dem sogenannten Sterben.
That it doesn't end, and it convinced me, and this is something that I still like to phrase as, paradise is also where I am, or also hell is where I am. This means the way I am in my consciousness at the specific moment, or where I am at that moment, is the same as the way I am when I take off my clothes, so to speak. That's why I didn't feel well at that moment, not only physically, but also mentally. As you can see, I had the feeling that I hadn't lived my life. That's why I saw these images.
Okay, there's a big clue. Because I feel like I hadn't lived my life. Let's hear it again.
Not only physically, but also mentally.
Physically and mentally.
As you can see, I had the feeling that I hadn't lived my life.
I got the feeling that I hadn't lived my life. So what is that? That's the guilt trip. That's the thing that sends so many NDEers back down here. You're not completed. You haven't finished your mission yet. You're not done yet. You're not welcome here because we've denied you entry because you're not finished. So it seems like they have, the same playbook running, but a little twisted for those who are impaired with vision. Okay? But it's the same playbook. You just got to read in between the lines with all this. It's so diabolical.
The feeling that I hadn't lived my life. That's why I saw these images.
Kann man da etwas verallgemeinern?
Is there something you can generalize? What can people do so dying gets easier?
Wird?
Leben.
Live.
Und Leben ist Freude und
And living is joy and laughter.
Wenn es schwer fällt,
and even on hard days, you can find a silver lining if you train your eyes towards it.
Findet man immer einen Lichtpunkt.
Alles Gute.
Thank you very much for this interview.
Okay, so that's going to wrap up the NDE portion. And let's see. And I'd like to also just make everyone aware that I do have 2 YouTube backup channels, just in case something should ever happen here. I can be reached on those. Forever Conscious Research 2, Forever Conscious Research 3, and also I have an Odyssey account, as well as a where everything is sent over there. Usually after concluding the show, I want to let everyone know who does watch on Odyssey that if a show is approaching the 2-hour mark, or if it shows 2 hours exactly, that you're missing some part of the show, because very rarely, probably never, have I finished a show exactly at the 2-hour mark. So if you see that, then there's a good chance that there's a large chunk of the show missing. So just want to make that aware for those that watch on Odyssey. I also have a Twitter account and Instagram. And on Instagram, I've done some exclusive content over there. I've done some exclusive Odyssey content as well. On Instagram, I did a 3-part series on the correlation between NDEs and DMT. So if you'd like to check that out, you're more than welcome. At some point, I will put that on the channel. I'm hoping to get to that this month, but I got to do some video editing because the camera looks all screwed up on the first part. So hang in there with me. I'll get to that eventually. And also wanted to give a shout out to a very good friend of the channel, Jimmy, who has done a lot of work, not just during the live streams, but also behind the scenes. So please check out Jimmy's channel. He's trying to grow it, and he's done so much to help. And if you don't mind supporting him, that would be great. And also Vince, I'm going to throw his channel up. He's done a lot of great musical pieces, and he's also a good friend of the channel. Check him out. And he's got a lot of great stuff. Go check both of them out. They've done so much to help behind the scenes, and Vince has even created music for the channel that will be featured here in the future if we can get around the whole copyright thing. But you know, really, really amazing stuff. And thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Vince, for being such good friends and all your support and help through the, well, actually it's been a few years we've known each other, so thank you through the years. And also wanted to say, after live streams, sometimes we have chats in the Discord, voice chat. So if you'd like to come and join us afterwards, feel free. I'll be on the voice chat after tonight, and you're more than welcome to join us. A link will probably be posted shortly by Jimmy, and you're more than welcome to come on in and have a conversation with us. I'll show up for a little while and shoot the shit. So thank you much for each and every one of you. And I will see you all again tomorrow. Just so you know, Dan from Overwatch channel is coming back tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern. That will be Friday, May 27th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Dan from OverwatchProject.com. Overwatch channel here on YouTube, and I believe it's Overwatch Project on Odyssey. And we've had a couple interviews already with many more to come in the future, including tomorrow. And then those who are members of the Last Timers Club, that will be our monthly members live stream, will be Saturday, May 28th. That's a couple days at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So feel free to check out the live stream then. Got a good one planned for you. And thank you, as always, for support. And thank you, everyone, for watching. Much love and blessings. Please don't forget to spread the word and get the Soul Trap out there. If you can, that would be great. We just got to help spread the word. Every little bit helps. And hey, sharing a link could do so much for one person that you don't even know. Like, I never thought that the channel would grow as it has. And remember, just sovereignty and liberation that's the driving force for everything. Not submitting to whatever the heck's going on here, you know? So, and I'll leave one last thing. I have the stream elements for anyone that does wish to donate. Remember, anything that is of importance on the channel will never ever come with a price. Everything will always be free. That is important as it relates to the Soul Trap. But if you want a little extra content every month, you can join the YouTube memberships. Or if you'd like to show appreciation through the stream elements link or the super thanks, super chat, that's always there as well. But please, no, nothing is ever expected. So thank you. Much love and blessings to you all, and I will see you all again very soon. Take care of yourself. See you tomorrow night.